Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Well, what delights have I got for you this evening? And there we have it. 3 interesting bourbon whiskies, so we shall get on to tasting them in just a minute. Now, while we're talking about bourbon whiskies, if you'd have read my last newsletter, you'll know my thoughts on what's happened to the basic Buffalo Trace bottling. For those of you that don't know, Buffalo Trace have decided in their infinite wisdom to drop the alcohol content from 45% down to 40%. Well, you might think, what's that going to do to it? It's not going to make a great deal of difference. Well, I can tell you it certainly has. Essentially, they've ripped the guts out of what was once a great value for money whiskey. That's all I can basically say. They've absolutely ruined it. And it appears that I'm probably the only one that seems to think that way. And I wanted to know the reason why. And as luck would have it, a few weeks ago, the rep from Buffalo Trace dropped into the shop just to see how things were getting on. So I grilled him. And apparently the distillery have been thinking about doing this for quite a while, and they got their rep to do some research into whether this dropping of the ABV would be a good thing or not. And who did they ask? A number of bartenders in London is who they asked. They basically said, do you prefer this one, the 45% bottling, or do you prefer the 40% bottling? And apparently, they all said they love the 40% bottling. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're just going to sort of like drown it in whatever else you want to stick in your cocktail, it obviously doesn't seem to make much of a difference, really. And so they decided that they were going to carry on and go ahead with this. Did they actually speak to any whiskey shops or anything like that? No, of course they didn't. Because if people like myself and that really love whiskey and certainly love drinking whiskey neat, they would have told them that this was a complete and utter disaster. That you're just ruining what was a great whiskey just for the sake of making it a little bit cheaper, so you make a bit more money on it. I mean, it's beyond belief that a distillery that produces, the epic George T Stagg at its natural cask strength could conceivably consider doing this, but lo and behold, they have done. So it kind of left me with a bit of a quandary. Buffalo Trace, absolutely brilliant bottle for about 30 quid, and I needed to replace it, and so I've tasted a number of relatively inexpensive bourbons, and the one that I've chosen that I think certainly fits the bill, although I don't think quality wise it's quite as good as the old bottling of Buffalo Trace as this one, the old Grandad, but we'll obviously get on and taste that in due course. So all I can basically say is, if you work for Buffalo Trace, if you're the head honcho for Buffalo Trace, drop me a line and just explain why you've done this to such a great bourbon. But we shall see. Right, okay, shall we start with the old Grandad? Now, you might not think the label is up to a great deal, and it is a tad on the garish side, shall we say. A little bit of history. It's a very old brand that is now in the hands of Beam Global, so the actual distillery no longer exists, and this is all made at the Jim Beam distillery. It's also one of the few of the multitude of bottlings that Jim Beam do that has a slightly different mash bill to the standard Jim Beam range. What do I mean by that? Well, the mash bill is basically what it's made from. As you know, bourbon has to be made from a minimum of 50-51% of corn, and then you can use a bit of rye, you can use wheat, you can use barley, And this particular bottling has quite a high rye content, so you know you're going to expect some sort of nice buzzy spices, some grip, and you know a nice crispness to it. So let's stick our nose in the glass and see if it indeed has that. Well, it's a little bit shy. There's certainly some pleasant oak vanillins, reasonably robust. A bit of that burnt sort of toffee, but yeah, you can certainly smell the fresh, crisp rye grains. They give it a sort of a nice spiciness, and altogether it's quite a pleasant nose. Like I said, I don't think it's quite in the league of the old Buffalo Trace bottling, but I think if you like rye dominated whiskey and you like that sort of crisp bite, I think this is certainly very pleasant. Getting a little touch of orange now, a little bit of chocolate maybe. Okay. Right. Okay. Shall we see what this tastes like then? Yeah. Lovely rye intensity. Quite sharp. A little bit bitter, but that's the oak. Lots and lots of buzzy spices. They certainly are sitting very nicely in front of the oak. It's not too intrusive at all, and it does bitter a bit at the end, a little bit light, but overall it's very pleasant, very drinkable, dangerously so in actual fact, I think. So I think this is a very pleasant addition to the range, shall we say. Right, okay, shall we move on to the next bottling that I'm tasting? This is the Evan Williams, produced by the Heaven Hill Distillery. Evan Williams is a single cask bottling, and what they do is each release has a vintage date on it. Now, with single cask bottlings of all whiskies and what have you, there's always going to be a little bit of a variation, but generally speaking the theme kind of remains the same. For its price, Evan Williams is a stunningly good bourbon, and I've tasted a few bottlings over the years, which if you go and have a look at my WordPress blog you can obviously read. So let's see how this one stacks up to previous ones. Oh, it's very fat. A lot of corn. Some caramel, toffee, a lot of very sweet oak, very sweet vanilla-y and caramelly, and I'm struggling to get the rye content. I mean, one of the things with previous bottlings of Evan Williams, it had a lovely crispness, a lovely freshness, although probably not as heavy on the rye content as say the old Grandad. It certainly had a lovely freshness. This is just a bit fat, a bit, yeah. It's probably had a fair too many hamburgers, I think. But yeah, there's a bit of rye there, but I'm certainly not as impressed as I have been with previous ones. And in actual fact, I when I first tasted this a while ago, I actually had some of the 2000 and did a sort of a comparative tasting with the two, and the 2000 had this wonderful freshness, and I mean, all that. I'm not saying this is bad. This by no means. It's the quality is exceptionally good. It's just not quite there. I don't think. Okay. Shall we see what this tastes like then? Yeah, just as I was expecting. It's quite a lot of oak, very sweet, but very bitter at the same time. Balance is probably shaded a little bit more into the bitterness, and it is quite austere and a little bit short. Again, there isn't the rye there to kind of spice it up and give it some sexiness, I guess, for want of a better word. It's a bit short. And like I said, it just has this austerity. It just kind of like vanishes very, very quickly. Although not bad. Like I said, by no means up there with some of the previous bottlings of the Evan Williams. So hopefully, by the time the 2002 bottling appears, hopefully they will have chosen a better cask. Yeah, quite surprised. It's I guess whoever's picked this particular cask must have been having a bit of an off day, shall we say. But there you have it. That's the Evan Williams. So far away. And finally, this baby, the George T Stagg, the greatest bourbon on the face of the planet. Comes with a price tag, it has to be said. You know, somewhere approaching £100 or so. And you might think, oh, that's a bit much, but you know, it's frightening. The this particular sample that I have in my glass isn't from this particular bottling. It has to be said. This is an older bottling that I happen to have, which was comes from 2007. So this has got a slightly higher alcohol content at 72.4, which is pretty eye-watering. Whereas the current bottling is just 71.3. So, what are we going to expect from it? Well, alcohol. I mean, it's going to be quite pungent and powerful, I imagine. But let's see what we get. Yeah, there's a lot of alcohol, but yeah, it's not sort of, it's not too in your face, shall we say. I mean, it's got some lovely sort of menthol, little herbs, and the high alcohol content is certainly sort of dampening down on the oak. I mean, the oak is just wonderfully pure, slightly creamy, a little bit of toffee, bit of chocolate, some licorice, but oh, that is just such a stunning nose. There isn't just it's one of those whiskies that you just sort of like stick your nose in and you just go, my God, that's complex. Where do I start with that? And you know, dissecting it is really tricky, but it's got so much depth to it. Wonderful, absolutely gorgeous. Okay, shall we see what this one tastes like then? Ooh. Talk about drying. A combination of alcohol and tannin certainly hits you like a speeding bullet. But once that subsides, you get some lovely vanilla, some mocha, chocolatey, licorice, herbs, ultra clean vanilla oak. But it's evaporates into the mouth almost instantaneous. That's a hit. That's real bourbon. I mean, it's not very old at all, and you can tell, but that is seriously good. But I think it needs a little drop of water. Right, okay, shall we see if this has opened up and see if it's given us anything more? Violety, creamy, slightly, little bit of burnt toffee, but the oak is just now sort of released from its shell. It's absolutely gorgeous. Yep, there's still plenty of licorice, violets, like I said, that sort of honeyed toffee. Wonderful stuff. Okay, let's see what this one tastes like now. It's certainly not going to make my eyes water like last time. That's heavenly now. Still a smidge on the short side. It's all in the attack, but the attack has kind of softened now that the alcohol has been tamed a little bit. Still lots of wonderfully pure American oak, toffee, coffee, and not a huge amount of rye. I mean, the rye gives it a little bit of spiciness, but it's mainly the corn, but it's not overly fat corn. The high alcohol content, I think, is basically stopping it becoming too flabby. But the aftertaste, I mean, it's just sort of phenomenally good. I think greatest bourbon on the face of the planet. Yeah, I think I've got to agree with that. Okay, so let's sum these up then, shall we? Old Grandad, perfectly pleasant bourbon whiskey. Sub 30 quid, you know, you can't argue with that. I mean, okay, it's not in the same league as the Buffalo Trace, I mean, I'll admit that. But I think if you're after, you know, an affordable quaffing bourbon, I don't think you can go too far wrong with that. It's got some, like I said, some lovely rye character, really interesting, really clean, and you know, really enjoyable. Evan Williams, well, pick a better barrel next time, okay? I mean, you know, it's not bad. I mean, when I tasted it for the first time, I wondered whether they had indeed actually changed the mash bill, whether they had actually used more corn in this particular batch, or this particular barrel, should we say. But according to the rep, no, the mash bill remains unchanged. So, you know, I just think that they've just made a bad choice at the end of the day. Well, no, not a bad choice. No, that's wrong. I mean, it's still, the quality is still really, really good. I just think that if you look at it in regards to some of the other bottlings that they've done of it, they're far more impressive, shall we say. Well, what can you say about the Stag? Stag is the Stag. I mean, you know, I remember first being introduced to the Stag on New Year's Eve one year, and I mean, we'd already consumed a fair amount of alcohol, and then out comes the Stag, and well, you know, that was a good New Year's Eve, shall we say. But you know, it is frighteningly good. I think Jim Murray basically said in his review of it that it's one of those whiskies that you'll find whatever it is you're looking for, it's going to be there. It is just multi-dimensional. There is just so much going on in it. It's youthful, it's intense, it's kind of the essence of Buffalo Trace at the end of the day, because as you know, they produce a number of different bottlings, certainly a number of single barrel bottlings. So these are all going to be selections, and basically those that are destined to become bottled as George T Stagg are the cream of the crop, basically. And it just goes to show that what the distillery is producing is absolutely first rate. I mean, going back to the World Whisky Awards, 2 of the Buffalo Trace whiskies were up for the top award, the Buffalo Trace, the Eagle Rare 17-year-old and the Sazerac 18. Me personally, Sazerac 18 took it. It really was really impressive. It had a sort of an old Armagnac-y, oxidised character, but funnily enough, it was the Eagle Rare 17 that was World's Best Bourbon 2012. Although personally, I wasn't that enamoured with it. It actually didn't taste or smell like a 17-year-old bourbon. It was a lot younger. There was a lot of high-tone Mar notes. It was youthful. Yeah, I mean, it was good quality, but you know, you stuck some water with it and kind of the oak kind of disappeared, and you know, it was very, very youthful. But I was sitting next to a chap from Canada while we were judging it, and you know, these were the first ones that we tasted, and he turned around to me and said, you know, I don't want too much oak in my bourbon. I don't want all this sort of like, you know, Armagnac-y kind of character. But me, I loved it. That was what I wanted. You know, that's and the balance was exceptionally good. But anyway, I'm kind of digressing here. So back to the Stag. You know, if you love your bourbon, you know, you've got to taste it at some stage. It's expensive, yes, I'll give you that, but it is without a shadow of a doubt the greatest bourbon that money can buy. Underline, exclamation mark, end of story. You know, and although, like I said, the sample that I was tasting this evening was from an earlier bottling, we do have the current bottling available, you know, to purchase through our website, www.gauntleys.com, the usual place. Where you can also purchase the Old Grandad and the Evan Williams. So that's pretty much about it for this evening. I hope you've enjoyed watching this little American road trip, shall we say, and until next time, good evening. Why'd you do it? Why'd you do it? Yeah. Oh.
Just couldn't be arsed and grabbed any old barrel.
Yeah. Yeah, that will do. I don't care.
Yeah.
Just had an argument with the missus.
Going home in an hour's time.